So moving on with the next chapter, chapter 35. We have the summary of the chapter given in just one line before the chapter begins. This is a chapter wherein Phileas Fogg does not have to repeat his orders to Passepartout, and that too twice. Now we have come to a particular part of the story wherein Phileas Fogg, in spite of reaching his hometown, he is convinced that he has lost the bet. There is no hope for him. He had taken a big amount of loan in order to continue the journey, in order to complete the journey. But now that also is of waste, it's futile. Okay. So even when he has come back home, there is no movement in his house. His neighbors don't even come to know that he has come back, because he's so disappointed that he refuses to go out of the house, nor do anything. So let's just continue reading. The dwellers is the residents, people who stay over there. The dwellers in Savile Row. Savile Row is a place where he stays. Phileas Fogg stays. Would have been surprised the next day if they had been told that Phileas Fogg, I'll just scroll up to the right-hand side. Yes. If they were told that Phileas Fogg returned home. That's what I told you, dear students, that he was so disappointed that in spite of catching an express train, nothing seemed to work in favor of him. His doors and windows were still closed. No appearance of change was visible. After leaving the station, Mr. Fogg gave Passepartout instructions to purchase some provisions and quietly went into his domicile, that is his house. He entered his house. There was nothing that he wanted to speak much. He just told Passepartout to get a few provisions. This also shows how responsible he was. He, even in spite of his disappointment, it did not stop him from bothering or caring about people who were around him. And that is the lady, Auda, and his servant, his trusted servant, Passepartout. All right. So he bore his misfortune with his habitual tranquility. That is worry. Okay. It was habitual for him. He was used to it. He was used to such disappointments. Ruined. He was just ruined. That is, all his efforts were a waste. He was in terrible loss. And by blundering of a detective, blunder is a mistake. And why had he lost the bet? Okay, he had lost the bet not because of his own mistake, but because of the detective. Okay, the miscommunication, the misunderstanding that the detective, Mr. Fix, had about Fogg. After having steadily traversed that long journey, traverse is travel, overcome 100 obstacles. This is hyperbole. All right, he had faced many more probably obstacles, troubles, braved many dangers, still found time to do some good on his way. Good part was that he had saved that lady in India and he had asked her to come with him to England. Okay. To fail near the goal by a sudden event which he could not have foreseen. He had never expected that he would ever fail. And he would fail because of a mistake of somebody else. Somebody else's mistake had caused his failure. But a few pounds were left of the large sum he had carried with him. There only remained of his fortune the 20,000 pounds deposited at Barings, and this amount he owed to his friends of the Reform Club. What remained behind was 20,000 pounds. That was a part of his bet. Okay, if he won the bet, obviously his friends were supposed to give him the amount. But now that he had lost the bet, he owed his friends the amount. He was supposed to give it to them. Okay, scrolling down. So great had been the expense of his tour that even had he won, it would not have enriched him. It is probable that he had not sought to enrich himself, being a man who rather laid wagers for honor's sake than for the stake proposed. But this wager totally ruined him. So these 6 lines that I read just now, what does it mean? It means that he was a person, he had taken up this challenge, this bet, not for the sake of money, but for the sake of experience that it was going to give him, for the sake of happiness that it was going to give him. All right. So today, probably even Phileas Fogg, even though he felt that, even though he had won the money would have just been spent giving it here and there, because as it is, he had taken help from a lot of people to spend for the expenses. So here he felt the wager had completely ruined him. Okay, it had just left nothing for him. All right, he had taken this wager, that is the bet, for honor's sake, for appreciation from people and not for anything else. Mr. Fogg's course, however, was fully decided upon. He knew what remained him to do. Okay, he knew what he had to do now. What was gone was gone. So this shows us, this tells us the kind of person he was. He was very responsible. He knew what he had to do. Okay, at that time also when he had taken the bet, he had a very clear idea that he was taking it up not for just for money's sake, but for rich experiences that he was going to get. And now also he was very clear that he had some kind of duty ahead of him. The room in the house in Savile Row was set apart for Aouda, who was overwhelmed with grief at her protector's misfortune. From the words which Mr. Fogg dropped, she saw that he was meditating some serious project. Okay, now he had, so what in the previous paragraph that I read, all right, he knew what remained for him to do, which means that he had a responsibility towards the lady Aouda. Okay, and he had set apart a room for her, all right, and she was also equally sad because she and Passepartout, all right, were his constant companions, were Phileas Fogg's constant companions. They were there with him throughout his journey, and now they were equally as sad as he was. Okay, so next paragraph, knowing that English men governed by a fixed idea sometimes resort to desperate expedient of suicide. So she had heard that these Englishmen who probably don't get what they want, all right, he might just think of suicide, he might think of something extreme. Okay, and because of this, Passepartout kept a narrow watch upon his master, though he carefully concealed the appearance of so doing. Look at the concern that Passepartout had for his master. Probably this concern was out of his guiltiness, okay, the guilty feeling that he had, that he wished he had told his master, Phileas Fogg, about Mr. Fick's real identity. Okay, we have read that in the previous chapter. All right, that's how Passepartout felt. He wished that he had just told his master about Mr. Fick's real identity. He had found a bill from the gas company. First of all, the worthy fellow had gone up to his room, extinguished the gas burner, which had been burning for 80 days. He had found in the letter box a bill from the gas company, and he thought it was more than time to put a stop to this expense, which he had been doomed to bear. All right, he had kept this gas burner burning for those 80 days. He had a big bill to pay. He had extinguished that gas. All right, and now probably Phileas Fogg could only think about expenses and more expenses that he had to pay. The night passed. Mr. Fogg went to bed, but did he sleep? Aouda did not once close her eyes. Passepartout watched all night like a faithful dog at his master's door. So, the servant was much more to him. All right, he was so very concerned. He was doing his duty much more than a trusted and a faithful servant should have done. Mr. Fogg called him in the morning and told him to get Aouda's breakfast and a cup of tea and a chop for himself. He desired Auda to excuse him from breakfast and dinner, as his time would be absorbed all day in putting his affairs to rights. In the evening, he would ask permission to have a few moments conversation with the young lady. All right, so Mr. Fogg, he had, see all these line students, they're giving us a clear picture of how responsible Mr. Fogg was. Okay, he had made all the arrangements for Auda. All right, he had told Passepartout to get her the breakfast, get him whatever was required, and then probably he was not interested in having dinner. All right, he felt that more than having dinner, he had to look into the affairs. He had to pay whatever money he had to pay to people. The bills were pending. You know, all that thing he felt was much more important, or had to be given priority. And so he was not interested in having dinner. But then he said later on, maybe he could have, once his work was done, maybe he could spend some time with the lady talking to her. So, next paragraph. Passepartout, having received his orders, had nothing to do but obey them. Okay, this again shows his faithfulness. He looked at his imperturbable master and could scarcely bring his mind to leave him. Okay, Passepartout could see how disturbed he was, how worried he was. Okay, how disappointed he was. And so he just couldn't bear to or think of leaving him. His heart was full, conscience tortured by remorse. Remorse is guilt. Okay, as I told you again and again that he's absolutely guilty and just wished he had told his master about Mr. Fix's real identity. Okay, he accused himself more bitterly than ever of being the cause of irretrievable disaster. Irretrievable means something that cannot come back. A disaster which is like gone, it cannot just come back. The time cannot come back, cannot be brought back, in fact. Yes, if he had warned Mr. Fogg and had betrayed Fix's projects to him, his master would certainly not have given the detective passage to Liverpool. And then, so now he's just thinking about his previous actions. He wished. Students, this is a lesson for us. Well, then later on, when it's too late, we kind of think, I wish I had done that. I wish I had, not done this. Okay, but it's difficult and sometimes it's impossible to go back. Okay, to go back into time. So students, are you able to understand the theme that is there throughout this chapter also? The theme of time, that time is fickle, it can change at any moment and nobody has got the power or the strength to stop it. So whatever is going to happen is going to happen, but then we are in charge of the actions that take place. All right, this is very clear from Passepartout's now remorse, okay, guilty feeling. Okay, had he told his master, then maybe this disaster would have not have happened and they would have reached on time. So Passepartout could hold in no longer. My master, Mr. Fogg. So somewhere probably students, when we accept our mistakes, we feel a little better. We feel a little lighter. So similarly, something like this has happened to Passepartout as well. I scroll up in order to read the right hand side. Okay. So now, why do you not curse me? It was my fault. Okay, see, look at him. Okay, saying, why? Speak something to me. Speak something to me. Why don't you just curse me? Okay, that's what he says. Okay, that's what Passepartout says to his master. I blame no one, returned Phileas Fogg. Go. So, probably Phileas Fogg has accepted his destiny. Okay, he's accepted the fact, what other way it is. So he says, I don't want to blame anybody. Okay, so Passepartout left the room, probably felt all the more guilty, went on to find Auda, to whom he delivered his master's message. Okay, madam, he added, I can do nothing myself, nothing. I have no influence over my master, but you perhaps. Okay, so here again, Pasipatao just wants to see the well-being of his master. He just wants to see his master completely relaxed, at least a little bit. Okay, so he says, maybe I cannot do anything. Is there anything that you can do? Okay, what influence could I have? Replied Auda. She was a simple lady. So she said, what can I do? Mr. Fogg is influenced by no one. So again, this sentence tells us how clear Mr. Fogg was earlier, and even now after his disaster, he's completely in control of his emotions. Has he ever understood that my gratitude to him is overflowing? Has he ever read my heart? My friend, he must not be left alone an instant. You say he's going to speak with me this evening? You know, your Auda also, we can make out from her statements, her questions, that even she is equally concerned for Mr. Fogg. Okay, but somewhere she feels that how come he has not noticed her emotions for him? All right, how come her concern has gone unnoticed by Mr. Fogg? Yes, madam, probably to arrange for your protection and comfort in England. We shall see, replied Auda, becoming suddenly pensive. She suddenly becomes serious. She just cannot imagine the fact that what would Fogg do with her? Was he going to send her back to her country? Was he going to send her somewhere else? Okay, so this kind of shows us her thoughts, okay, her mind, this conflict of emotions in her mind. All right, on one hand, she's concerned about Mr. Fogg. On the other hand, she also feels, she's questioning, how come he hasn't bothered, or how come he hasn't noticed her feelings for her. Throughout this day, okay, throughout this day, Sunday is intentionally given in the bracket, students. All right, again, the theme of time, all right, is important. The house in Savile Row was as if uninhabited. Uninhabited meaning nobody could make out somebody was living over there. Everything was just quiet. Okay, nobody was talking, and probably all three of them were just, you know, having lot of emotions, lot of feelings, lot of thoughts going on in their head. Okay, Phileas Fogg, for the first time since he had lived in that house, did not set out for his club when Westminster clock struck 7:30. It was 7:30. Okay, this is the bridge in London, Westminster Bridge. All right, the clock, all right, had struck 7:30. Sorry, 11:30. And usually it is time for him to visit his friends, to go to club. But then Mr. Fogg has not done that. Okay, how could he must have thought, how could he just go to the club being a failure? What was the point going to the club? He owed his friends a big deal of money which he had to pay. So why should he present himself at the Reform? His friends no longer expected him there. Phileas Fogg had not appeared in the saloon on the evening before, Saturday, 21st of December at 9:15. Okay, 9:15 is 8:45. Okay, he had just not seen anybody. Okay, see, intentionally throughout this day, Sunday. It's not actually Sunday, students. Actually, the day is Saturday. All right, but then all three of them have just a small miscommunication in their head that it's a Sunday, but actually that day is not Sunday, it's actually a Saturday. He had lost his wagger. Okay, Saturday, 21st of December, 9:15, he had lost his wagger. It was not even necessary that he should go to the bankers for the £20,000. For his antagonist already had his check in their hands, and they only had to fill it out, send it to the bearings to have the amount transferred to their credit. So he could just imagine, Mr. Fogg could only imagine that his friends were just waiting for him to give them a check. Okay, they were eagerly waiting for him for the check. All right, and the moment he gave them a check, they would go to the bank and transfer the amount from his account to their account, and thereby make him realize more about his failure. Page 95. Mr. Fogg, therefore, had no reason for going out, so he remained at home. He shut himself up in his room, busied himself putting his affairs in order. Passepartout continually ascended and descended the stairs. Again, this sentence tells us that's how restless Passepartout equally is. The hours were long for him. You know, Passepartout felt the time just wasn't moving. He listened at his master's door, looked through the keyhole as if he had a perfect right so to do, and as if he feared that something terrible might happen at any moment. You know, he just had that thing in his mind that an Englishman, if he did not get anything he wished for, might contemplate suicide, might think of doing something worse. So, you know, he was constantly looking through the keyhole. Okay, not just to see what his master was doing, but in fact to see that his master was absolutely safe. Sometimes he thought of Fix, but no longer in anger. Okay, he was thinking about Fix. There was no anger left. What was there? Fix, like all the world, had been mistaken in Phileas Fogg and had only done his duty in tracking and arresting him, while he passed it out. So even, you know, that thought is again and again constantly going on in his head. Okay, but now there is no anger for Mr. Fix. Probably he's upset with himself. He feels that the entire world, including him, okay, including him, had considered Mr. Fogg as a big mistake, as a big blunder, or, you know, had just mistaken his identity, his personality. Because students, as we read in the theme and the plot, all right, that we don't know much about Phileas Fogg. Okay, we just know that he lives a solitary life. Solitary life means lives alone. He doesn't talk much to people. He's a man of few words. To students, usually it happens that when we don't talk much, you know, people start thinking about us the other way, the otherwise. Similarly, probably here also people had started thinking about Mr. Fogg as the other way, all right? But it was not like that. Mr. Fogg, Phileas Fogg, in fact, was a gentleman. This thought haunted him, and he never ceased cursing his miserable folly. Folly is a mistake. He just couldn't stop cursing himself, blaming himself more than anybody else. Finding himself too wretched to remain alone, he knocked at Auda's door, went into her room, seated himself without speaking in a corner, and looked ruefully at the young woman. All right, he just didn't know what exactly he should be doing. And so he just went to her room and just kept on looking, and then sat in a corner, all right, and just looked at her very carefully. All right, he was observing her, all right, and Auda was still pensive. She was still worried. Even her mood was equally quite low. 7:30, again mention of time, 7:30 in the evening. Mr. Fogg sent to know if Auda would receive him. And in a few moments, he found himself alone with her. So evening it's 7:30 time, and both Mr. Phileas Fogg and Auda are having a meeting now. Okay, just a moment, students. All right, next paragraph. Phileas Fogg took a chair and sat down near the fireplace. Fireplace, it's probably cold at that time, so they're sitting near the fireplace to make themselves feel warm. He sat opposite Auda. No emotion was visible on his face. Fogg returned. Fogg returned was exactly the Fogg who had gone away. There was the same calm, the same impassibility. All right, probably that is the reason Auda felt that he never ever noticed her, because there were no emotions that were reflected on his face. He was just calm, he was just peaceful as he was ever. He sat several minutes without speaking. Then, bending his eyes on Auda, "Madam," said he, "will you pardon me for bringing you to England?" So again, we come to know about new conflict that is going on in Mr. Phileas Fogg's mind. Okay, he is guilty about getting the lady to England, because this is because he feels that now he is completely lost. Okay, he is in complete loss. He doesn't have anything. So how was he going to support her? He brought her to England. probably with the thought of saving her, giving her a better life. But then here he himself didn't have anything. How was he going to support her? So he's asking her to forgive him. Okay, pardon is, he's asking for forgiveness. I, Mr. Fogg, replied Auda, checking the pulsations of her heart. So when he's asking her, can you pardon me? She's surprised. She says, you want me to forgive you? Please let me finish, returned Mr. Fogg. When I decided to bring you, so now he is talking about his mind. And just go scroll up, students, so that we can read the right hand side part. Okay, so he says, when I got you away from your country, which was so unsafe for you, I was rich, counted on putting a portion of my fortune at your disposal. Then your existence would have been free and happy. But now I am ruined. Here that's what he's saying. So can't we say that he's a complete thorough gentleman? All right, a very decent person. He felt that probably he was going to win the bet, he's going to become rich, and the money that he gets, he was going to give a part of the money to her. All right, and with that, she could have lived a very happy and free life. But now that he had lost everything, how was he going to support her? To this, it's very interesting. Auda's reply is thoroughly interesting. I know it, Mr. Fogg. And I ask you in my turn, will you forgive me for having followed you? And who knows, for having perhaps delayed you? Those contributed to your ruin. Here now she has started feeling guilty. She is asking for forgiveness. She says, because hadn't he come there to save her, rescue her, maybe he would have reached England early. That's what she feels. Okay, because obviously he had spent some time saving her, rescuing her. Okay, so Mr. Fogg, resumed Auda, not content with rescuing me from a terrible death, you thought yourself bound to secure my comfort in a foreign land? All right, she's a very confident lady. She knows what she has to talk. Okay, so she says, aren't you just happy rescuing me from a terrible death? You want to again give me some money to make me secure over here? Wasn't just rescuing me sufficient for you? That's what she says. Yes, madam, but circumstances have been against you. Still, I beg to place the little I have left at your service. Still, probably is not able to understand what is going on in Auda's heart and mind. Okay, so he says that whatever little bit I have, I plan to give it to you so that at least you are free and you are safe. But what will become of you, Mr. Fogg? As for me, madam, I need nothing. So, she says, if you give me everything, what are you going to have? He says, I don't need anything. So he's quite a simple person. He says, I don't need anything at all. Okay. But how do you look upon the fate, sir, which awaits you? So she says, what are you going to do about your destiny, about your fate, which is waiting for you? So probably he says, no, I'm used to doing that. Sorry. At least, want should not overtake a man like you, your friends. You should just think about everybody. I have no friends, madam. Your relatives, I have no longer any relatives. So, we come to know that he has no friends, he has no relatives. I pity you then, Mr. Fogg, for solitude is a sad thing. Loneliness, solitude is loneliness. It's a sad thing. Okay, she says you have no friends, you have no family. Okay, because he thinks that he should give her whatever money he has remaining with him. But then she says, keep that money for your friends, keep that money for your family. So he says, there's nobody. Okay, so she says that indeed very sad. Solitude is a sad thing. Loneliness is a sad thing. Okay, with whom will you talk? With whom will you confide your griefs? Next page. Okay, she says that misery itself, it should be shared by two sympathetic souls, maybe born with patience. So, here she's indirectly trying to give him a message that, when sadness, problems, if we share it with our friends, we can definitely find a solution to it. Okay, so here we can make out that even the feelings that she has for Mr. Fogg are absolutely very genuine. So she says that if you don't have any family or friends, with whom are you going to share your miseries? Okay. So to that, he says that yes, it is definitely it's said that when you share your problems with somebody, you definitely find a solution, but then I have nobody. So here she continues, Mr. Fogg, said Auda, rising and seizing his hand. Do you wish at once a kinswoman and friend? Will you have me for your wife? So here is a surprise, a jackpot for Mr. Fogg. Okay. So here we need to understand that both the people over here, all three of them in fact, they have absolutely genuine and real feelings for each other. It's a feeling of concern. Okay, genuine concern for each other. And here now Mr. Fogg, Phileas Fogg and Auda also have the same. Mr. Fogg, at this, rose in turn. There was an unwanted light in his eyes. There was a ray of hope. He had never expected something like this. A slight trembling of his lips. Auda looked into his face. The sincerity, the rectitude, the firmness, the sweetness of the soft glance of a noble woman who could dare all to save him, to whom she owed all, at first astonished. This is a big long sentence. Okay, this is just the feelings that she has on her face. Okay, he sees her as a firm lady, a very strong lady. At the same time, she's very sweet to him. Okay, so all these feelings at that moment, they penetrated him. That is, they reached him. Her feelings reached him. Till this time, he was just looking at her as a respectable lady, a lady who was his responsibility. But now that she wanted to be his wife, now all her feelings for him were very clear to Mr. Fogg. He shut his eyes for an instant, as if to avoid a look. When he opened them again, he just said one line, I love you. Yes, by all that is holiest, I love you. I'm entirely yours. So, probably Mr. Fogg was hesitant as to how should he speak to her. Okay, what if she doesn't love me? But now that she had clearly said that she loved him, he also expressed his feelings. Students, probably in this journey of 80 days, okay, Mr. Fogg had understood what human emotions could do. Okay, what could people around him could do, what difference they could make in life. For example, how important was a family to him. Okay, cried Auda, pressing his hand to her heart. Passepartout was summoned, he was called, appeared immediately. Mr. Fogg still held Auda's hand in his own. Passepartout understood. His big round face became radiant as tropical sun at its zenith. That is, his face just glowed, brightened up with happiness. He just couldn't conceal his happiness. Okay, hide his happiness. Next paragraph. Mr. Fogg asked him if it was not too late to notify the Reverend Samuel Wilson at Middlebourne Parish that evening. So, he's the priest. Now that they both had decided to become husband and wife, they had to get married. And for that, they needed a priest. So Mr. Fogg asked if they could call Reverend Samuel Wilson. Samuel Wilson was a priest. Okay, Reverend is respected. Okay, parish is a church. It's the local church. Okay, Passepartout smiled, his most genial smile, and said, never too late. He was so happy for his master that he said, I just checked and I don't think it's late. It was 5 minutes past 8. Okay, it was 5, that is 8:05. Will it be for tomorrow, Monday? Yes, for tomorrow, Monday, said Mr. Fogg, turning to Auda. Yes, for tomorrow, Monday, she replied. So, here they both are quite happy and they've decided to get married immediately next day, which is a Monday. Okay, Passepartout hurried off as fast as his legs could carry him. So this is the end of this next chapter as well. Okay, before continuing with the next two chapters, there are two chapters which are remaining, all right, which will be covered in part 3 of this novel. All right, so this particular lesson around the world in 80 days is going to be divided into 3 parts. First part covers the theme, the plot and the synopsis. The second part covers these 2 lessons, and the last part is going to cover the remaining 2 lessons. So in this way, students, it's going to be easier for you to study all the 3 parts. I just hope you go through both the parts and be ready for the next class. Thank you so much.